Hey class, welcome to part 4 of our Creation, Fall, and Founders module here in The Greatest Story Ever. I want to say a couple of things at the very outset here, a couple quick things at the top before we jump into our passages and our stories for this week. Number one is, I handed this out actually 2 weeks ago, and it's called the Typologies and Theme Resolutions. This is the list that I gave you. And it just says Jesus is the blank who blank, and it leaves very large blanks. I did not get a chance to discuss this or explain this 2 weeks ago when I handed it out. So let me do that a little bit better now, because if we got a chance to do this in class on Sunday here. What this is intended to be is a shorthand way for you to keep track of all of the cool ways that we're gonna highlight from now on, of all of the ways that Jesus is the fulfillment and Jesus becomes the resolution to some of the stories and some of the people and figures that we encounter here in the Old Testament. So as we go through these, I will try to provide for you, if you miss some of these in class itself, some of the ways that you can be keeping a shorthand list of these things. Now, one other thing I want to say about this, though, is that I don't want the shorthand to become the totality of what we remember, right? The shorthand is just to kind of keep a full, cool list and keep track of all of these ways that Jesus fulfills all these things. But I want them to jog our memory. I want them to help us remember the fullness of the stories that we're talking about, as opposed to the shorthand, the little quick snippet statements that we're going to make becoming, the entire way that we remember everything. Like, this is it. This is all I need to know about the story, is this one quick one-liner. Such as, for example, right, we said something like, from last week, that Jesus is the true and better Abel, who, though innocently slain, his blood cries out for our acquittal, not for our condemnation. Okay, so that's a cool statement, right? And it's a way for us to see how Jesus fulfills the person in the story of Abel from these early chapters of Genesis. But I don't want that to be all you remember. I want that to help you to remember, like, okay, what was going on in the story of Cain and Abel? And how is Jesus our answer to all of the problems that we see that pop up from that early point? Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing that I want to say here at the outset is, if you did not get a chance yet to either be in class for part 3 of this module or to watch the videos for them, please do that so that we can all be on the same page as we continue with these really foundational aspects of the redemptive historical lens of reading Scripture together. That's going to give you the basis that you need. That's going to give you the tools that you need, that we are absolutely going to be talking about for the rest of our class time together, both in this module and future modules. So it's really important, and it's going to be really helpful to you if you feel caught up on that. And if there's parts of that you don't understand, I would want you to reach out to me and let me help you to kind of be on the same page with us with that really foundational aspect of what we're doing. Okay. Those things out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in to our passages and our chapters for today and this week. What I tried to do this week is I wanted to spend more time showing you the fullness and the depth of what we can do in terms of seeing these stories fulfilled in Jesus. So 2 weeks ago, I kind of had to go through these really quickly because we spent so much time talking about what the redemptive historical lens of Scripture is, that we didn't get to spend as much time as I would have liked personally on the stories and really developing the fullness of these stories and showing you how cool this really is. So this week I want to do that, so I just picked 3. Even though there were lots of chapters for us to read, I said we're going to focus on 3 stories, and we're going to do these in a bigger, better way and a richer, more deep dig into these stories to help you see just how cool I think this lens of Scripture can be. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and jump right in. The first one, and if you remember, this is one from last week that I told you I'm going to introduce this one, but we're going to wait to kind of get the full depth of it, and that was the Tower of Babel. And the good news is that time to get into the full depth of it is this week. It's right now. So let's do that. So let's remember back. What did we say about the Tower of Babel? What was going on at the Tower of Babel? The people decided to build this tower to heaven, right? To climb it, to make a name for themselves. For what? What's the purpose? What are they trying to do here? To become like God himself. To make a name for themselves, they say, right? Okay, and this is, I think, an interesting thing. As we think back to even before the Tower of Babel, to some of the covenants that God has already made, some of the commandments he's already made to people earlier in the book of Genesis. What has he told the people that he wants them to do? He told them to be fruitful and multiply, right? He told them to spread out across the earth and make civilizations. Okay. Let's look now back at Genesis 11. Let's think about the Tower of Babel. And the people are actually doing the exact opposite, aren't they? They are willfully disobeying and going against God's command to spread out. No, what they're saying is, yeah, God said to spread out, but what if we didn't? Maybe God's holding out on us. Maybe God knows that if we spread out like he told us to, that we can't become great. We can't build this one great civilization that can become so amazing that we could build our way up to heaven and become like gods ourselves. Maybe that's what God's trying to stop us from doing. You can totally see echoes of Eden here, can't you? Of Adam and Eve in the garden thinking, maybe God's holding out on us not to tell us not to eat this fruit. Same thing going on here at Babel. So the people say, nope, we're gonna disobey God very willfully, very intentionally, and we're gonna make our way up to him, up to heaven, and let's see what happens when we do that. So God says, we have to do something to stop this because this is the very opposite of my will for my people, and this is the very opposite of what's best for them, actually. So let's confuse their language and force them to spread out. And so God does that, right? He confuses their language. They can no longer communicate with each other. And then God uses that to push the people out a little bit more forcefully into his plan for all the world and what he wants to do. Okay. So we know then that what the people are doing, this building a tower up to God, is not God's way, and it's not God's plan. Let's talk about what God's plan is then. If this isn't the way, then what is the way? How do we reach God and reach heaven on this side of the fall? Because we have a big problem here after Adam and Eve, right? After what Adam and Eve have done, and this division and this wedge that's being driven between us and God, like something has to be done about this. And if we can't just build our way up to reach God, now that God is no longer dwelling with us in the garden the way he was pre-fall with Adam and Eve, then how do we find God? How do we reach God? And we're gonna find that answer in Genesis chapter 28. I'm sorry, not Genesis 28. Pause. I'm skipping ahead. First, let's go to John chapter 1. We're actually going to come back to Genesis 28, but first let's go to John 1. John 1, what do we have here? We have a couple of Jesus' future followers who are actually disciples of John the Baptist. Nathaniel is the main one here. Philip is the first one. So Philip and Nathaniel follow John the Baptist around, and as John the Baptist guys meet Jesus, John the Baptist is like, look, you guys are following me, but this is the one you should be following. You should become followers of Jesus. And they're both skeptical at first. But Philip goes and he meets Jesus, and he is totally convinced. And he comes back and he tells Nathaniel, look, I just spent time with Jesus, and he is the Messiah. He's the Son of God. We've got to follow him. And he's from Nazareth, and Nathaniel cuts him off. He's like, what? Nazareth? You're telling me the Messiah could come from Nazareth? Right? This is crazy talk. As I try to cast this vision of what he's talking about and how we can connect with it in our time and our place. Sometimes I like to say things like, this would be like if someone said, hey, Jesus is coming back and we got to go see him. It's the second coming. He's going to be down in downtown Grandview. And people would be like, wait, what? Jesus is not coming back to Grandview. If he's coming back anywhere in the world, I'm going to guess it's not Grandview. Or, if some of you are from Grandview and you find yourselves rubbed the wrong way by me using that as my example, I'm from Independence, right? And then we could say the same thing about my hometown. If Jesus came back, I would be shocked if Jesus comes back to Independence, Missouri, and decides that's where he's going to make his big reveal in the second coming. So, this is what Nazareth has, this reputation of not being like the nicest town around, right? Okay, so, but Nathanael has this incredible moment where he comes and Jesus talks with him, and Jesus tells him, I know you, I saw you under the fig tree. And we don't know what happened to Nathanael under this fig tree, but it must have been some incredible moment for him, because he immediately is like, you know about the fig tree moment? Then you are the Son of God, and I will worship you, right? So he must have had this incredible moment where God felt really present with him in this moment of prayer that he had under this fig tree, and Jesus is like, yeah, I saw you under that fig tree. That was me. Okay, but let's skip here, and let's jump into then what Jesus says to him that gives us a cool clue to connect with the Tower of Babel. Jesus answered him and said, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Now, what is going on here? What in the world is Jesus even talking about? I think it's easy for us to see, especially if you were with us last module, what he means by Son of Man. This is a reference to himself, right? Jesus calls himself the Son of Man very often in the Gospels. And we read Mark together in our last module, and we saw this, that he often referred to himself as the Son of Man. Okay, so he's saying on me, something about the angels ascending and descending on me. What is he talking? It's still hard for us to understand what he's talking about, unless we go all the way back to Genesis 28. So let's do that. And I want to read for you really quickly what happens when Jacob has a dream. Jacob came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in the place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it, on the ladder. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and the north and the south, and in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Okay, so what is going on here? We have Jesus making this statement to Nathanael and saying, you will see the angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man, on me. He is referencing Genesis 28, where Jacob has a dream. And in Jacob's dream, he sees a ladder going to heaven. Can you see the similarity here? This is similar to what? The Tower of Babel, right? There's a ladder going all the way up to heaven, a way that you could climb to reach God, just like the people were trying to build in Genesis 11. But something very different happens. The opposite thing happens. Because my translation that I read, the ESV, which is a great translation, I love the ESV, but it translates in verse 13, and behold, the Lord stood above it. But actually, there's a different way that we could translate this, because it's using the third person singular masculine pronoun here for it, which mean the ladder that he saw, but it also could mean him. And in the Hebrew, the word for above could also mean beside. So I think it actually might be better for us to translate this, and behold, the Lord stood beside him, meaning Jacob. Because what has happened in Jacob's dream? When Jacob wakes up from his dream, he says, surely the Lord is in this place with me, and I did not know it. So what has happened? Did Jacob climb the ladder in his dream? Did he go up to God? He didn't. The opposite happened. God came down the ladder to him and stood beside him. And Jacob said, surely the Lord is in this place with me. So the answer to our question of what can we do? How can we be with God on this side of the fall of Adam and Eve? The answer is that God will come down the ladder to us. We don't have to build our way up to God. God will come down to us. And in John chapter 1, in an incredible passage, Jesus says, yes, and that is me. I am Jacob's ladder. I am the way that God has come down to be with his people. It's through me. It's through Jesus. Cool? I think this stuff is amazing. I hope you guys are as blown away by some of the stuff as I read this passage, and I've taught this to students multiple times now, and every time I go through it, I still find this just as cool as the first time that I read it. To see how all these pieces fit together and how Jesus is fulfilling these incredible passages of the Old Testament. Okay, let's move to our second one. Our second one is going to be Jacob and Leah and Rachel. We don't have to turn very far. We can turn to the very next chapter because it's in Genesis 29. Okay, what's happening here? If I had to summarize Genesis 29 and the story of Jacob and Leah and Rachel, I would say that kind of the point of the story is to caution us from idolizing the wrong things in life, even if they are good things. And we can take two of our figures, two of the people in this story to represent this. Let's start with Jacob. Who or what does Jacob idolize in the story? He idolizes Rachel, doesn't he? He says, oh, I am head over heels for Rachel. If I could get Rachel's love, she is so beautiful. She is so amazing. If I could have her love, my life would be completely fixed. Everything that I need, everything I want in life, I would have enough of it if I can get Rachel. She will fix everything for me. And what I'm about to say is I like it because as a quick little one-liner, I think it summarizes very well and very succinctly and gives us this really clear picture of what's wrong with this type of thinking and what could go wrong with it. But I also want to preface this by saying this is going to sound really harsh about Leah, and I don't want it. So whatever this says about Leah, I want this to be more about Jacob, what I'm about to say, than it is about Leah, okay? Because what happens to Jacob is he thinks that he's working for 7 years for the love of Rachel, everything that he's putting his hope and faith in and that he's been dreaming about. And he wakes up the next morning and he turns and the Bible actually it gives us this incredible line, and behold, it was Leah. And this is what happens to us. Anything that we put all of our faith and our hope and our trust in, besides God, God is the only one that can live up to this kind of pressure. Anything else that we say, this is going to be what can save me. This can be what can fix all of my problems, and I can put my hope and my faith and my dreams in. In the morning when we wake up, it's going to be Leah. It's going to be less than what we wanted. It's not going to be what we thought it was going to be. And let's make another point here to say that even Rachel's not Rachel, right? He ends up with Rachel. He works an extra 7 years to get Rachel. And if you read on in Genesis, and I hope you do, or you did for this week, you see that even Rachel doesn't live up to these dreams that Jacob, this pedestal that he has put her on, and these dreams that he has for his love for her. Okay, so with all that pushed aside, now I want to turn to Leah. Because Leah, even though we were maybe just a little bit callous with the way we described her in terms of Jacob's dreams, Leah is the least terrible person in this story, right? Leah is the closest thing we have to a protagonist in our story. And with good reason, because Leah is the one who finally figures this out. Because she goes through a similar thing, and even worse for her. As bad as Jacob felt having Leah, Leah should feel worse that her husband is Jacob. I mean, what a clown this guy is, right? And so here's Leah being forced by her father to marry, this clown Jacob. And Jacob doesn't love her, and he doesn't have any affection for her, and she's going to feel terrible. She feels unwanted and unloved. So she turns in this moment to the only thing that a woman in her time and her place in this culture could do to add value to a family, and that's to produce children. Because women couldn't work, right? She had no job or career or something that she could put all of her energy and her to kind of change her vision of what could make her feel valuable in life. All she has is now to produce these children. And notice that then she starts to give her children names, and every single one of these names means something like, maybe my husband will love me now. Maybe he will see that I'm producing sons for him, and he will actually have affection for me, and he will actually love me. But she's wrong, because we already said Jacob's a total clown, and Jacob doesn't care about any of that, and he is really brutal to Leah, and he doesn't love her. And she gets caught in this cycle of hoping that something will change, but it's not changing. Nothing's happening until we get to the turning point of the story. What's the turning point of the story here in Genesis 29? It happens at the very end. It tells us that Leah bears a son and names him Judah. And Judah means praise, and because Leah says after having Judah, this time I will praise the Lord. So what's happening here for Leah? Leah finally realizes that the way to true happiness and true peace in her life, and the way to actually feel wanted and loved in life, is not going to happen for her through her family. It's not going to happen through bearing children. It's not going to happen through the love of Jacob, because Jacob never figures it out. Jacob never gets it. But Leah does. Leah gets it. She says the only way this is going to happen is through the perfect, unfailing love of God. And there's no coincidence that this happens when she has Judah, because Judah is the son of Jacob who carries the messianic line we're going to learn. He bears the scepter, it tells us later in Genesis. This means that the line that leads to the Messiah, to the king who will save all of Israel, goes through the tribe of Judah. So, why is this important? Because that is the one who is going to give us the perfect unfailing love of God. The one who will show us this perfectly is Jesus, the descendant of Judah, the descendant of Leah. And isn't this kind of a cool way that God blesses Leah? Because she becomes the mother of the Savior of the whole world. She becomes the one through whom Jesus' line is traced. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, let's do our last one. All right, the last one is going to be the story of Joseph. There are lots and lots of chapters here that I had you go through on Joseph's story, but let's just I'm going to pick out a few important aspects of Joseph's story. The thing I want to say at the top is when we read the story of Joseph, I don't think at this point that every character that we've read, the Bible has been really quick to show us why that person is a fallen, imperfect human being, right? Like there's no possibility of us putting Jacob on too high of a pedestal. I mean, he's shown to be a liar and a cheater and a crook from the very outset. Or Laban, right? Who's maybe even worse than Jacob, if that's possible at all. Even Abram, right? Even Abraham, we see lots of things, lots of mistakes that he makes. Isaac is a terrible father. He causes tons of the problems between Jacob and Esau by picking favorites. He has a favorite son. And then these two sons are fighting each other all the time. And okay, so everyone that we've come into contact with so far in our story, it's easy to see like, yeah, these people have problems, just like all of us, right? We all have problems, we all have issues. Then we get to Joseph. And an interesting thing happens with Joseph. If you go out and you see sermons preached about Joseph, or if you read books and commentaries on the story of Joseph, to me, there's a huge, weird issue that pops up with Joseph where he's put on this weird pedestal and everyone just assumes that everything Joseph ever did in his life must have been good. And there must have been a good purpose for it. And even if we encounter things in his story that seem troublesome to us, well, we can explain those away. Let's think of a reason that Joseph must have had to do this. For example, early on it tells us that Joseph, though 17 years old, goes home from a night or from a big week trip with his brothers where they're out tending their flocks out in the pasture lands. And he comes back and he has a bad report on them. He's tattling to their father on things that they've done. I don't know. What were they doing? Were they out there like using bad language and drinking too much or something? Who knows, right? But Joseph comes back and he's 17 years old and he's still tattling on his brothers. Okay. Now you'll see people that say, well, they must have been doing something really, really terrible that was endangering people and he had to come back. And that could be true. It could be true. But let's not go way out of our way just to try to rescue some of these things about Joseph that we find in the text that probably paint a picture of him that says he's not perfect, right? Joseph isn't perfect. It's very, very easy to see that Joseph kind of revels in and basks in these dreams that he has where he wants to tell his family, hey, I had a dream where all of you were bowing down to me. Right, and they all get mad about it, and it's easy to see why. Like someone telling you that, that's a dream you keep to yourself, isn't it? If you had a dream where all of your family members were bowing down to you as the king, wouldn't you be like, maybe we don't need to broach that subject. Maybe we don't need to bring that up at the family dinner table tonight. No, but Joseph's like, oh yeah, no, we're going to talk about this. You guys were all bowing to me. Isn't this cool? And they're all like, no, this is not cool, and you're not cool. Okay, so I want to say this because it's going to be important to us when we get to the end and what I think is the turning point of this story. But all of that does not mean that we can't say that Joseph is a type of Christ, because he definitely is. Because remember, what we talked about last week is that this redemptive historical lens can occur through fulfillment or contrast. So there are certainly positive aspects of Joseph's life. He did a lot of great things too. And there are ways that we can show how Joseph leads us to a better, more fuller picture of these attributes that he has in Jesus himself in a positive way. But even if there are problems that Joseph has, even if Joseph isn't a perfect person, even in his downfall, those things show us our need for Jesus by means of contrast. Okay? So we don't have to hold these people up on pedestals to do this redemptive historical lens because Jesus fulfills everything, the good and the bad in Scripture. Okay, but let's take a look then at how Joseph is a type of Christ. Number one, he was attacked and plotted against by his own people, by his own family here, right? By his brothers, out of jealousy. And this is something that we absolutely saw when Jesus was being pursued by the Pharisees, by the religious leaders. The Bible tells us, the Gospels tell us, that they were actually overtly jealous of him, and they plotted against him, and they attacked him, and this is very similar, okay? One kind of cool thing, just so we don't hold Judah up to a pedestal either, because in the last story, Judah became the way that we saw Christ enter into the story, right? Because Judah bears the messianic line. But Judah's no angel, right? Look in this story. Who is the one who comes up with the idea to sell Joseph into slavery? It's Judah, right? And do you know what the Greek name for Judah is? When you translate Judah, the Hebrew name, into Greek, it's Judas, like Judas Iscariot. Judah sells his brother for some pieces of silver, just like Judas sells Jesus out for pieces of silver, okay, for money. Okay, I think that's a cool little connection here between the two stories. The next one. How is Joseph a type of Christ? He was falsely accused and punished for the sins of others. This is when he was being tempted by Potiphar's wife, eventually in the story, right? And Joseph does not cave into that temptation, but it doesn't matter. He still gets punished and accused of this thing, even though he didn't do it. Just like Jesus is accused and falsely punished for no reason, for doing no harm to anyone other than to people's egos and their pride, I think. And I think the same thing is happening here in the story of Joseph with Potiphar's wife. Okay, third, despite all of this, Joseph was exalted to a place of great authority and great responsibility. He makes it to number 2 in charge of all of Egypt. This is a crazy thing for a non-Egyptian to reach that level of authority in the nation of Egypt. This is crazy. Similarly, though Jesus was falsely accused and punished and even killed on a cross, the Bible tells us, and the New Testament authors tell us, that Jesus becomes exalted to the right hand of God, to a place of authority over the entire universe that no one else will ever have, is the great place of authority and responsibility that Jesus has attained on this side of his death and resurrection. Very cool. Very cool. Okay. Now let's get to the turning point of this story. What's the turning point of this story of Joseph? We get to this very weird plan that Joseph devises when his brothers and all of Israel run out of food because of the famine. And the brothers come and they ask him for help. And Joseph, here's where I want us not to put Joseph on this pedestal. Don't say, well, Joseph had this cool plan that he had all along because he wanted to show his brothers the error of their ways. Let's not make this weird. Joseph had revenge on his mind, right? Let's read the text the way the text, I think, deserves to be read here. And the clear message of the text is that Joseph wanted to get back at his brothers. And he devises this weird, crazy plan. It takes chapters and chapters to unfold, right? Where he's going to say, okay, I'm going to give you some of it, but then you got to come back. When you come back, I want you to bring your younger brother. And then they bring Benjamin back. And he's like, okay, now I want to hide some of Pharaoh's things in Benjamin's bag and send them away, and then I'm going to send my guards after him, and they're going to say, "Hey, stop! Someone stole this cup, and we got to find it, and it's going to be in Benjamin's bag, and then that's going to be a way for me to keep Benjamin here with me and send my brothers away because Benjamin's the brother that I actually care about and love anyway." Okay, so he has this crazy plan, and he's going through with the whole thing until this turning point happens in the story. What's the turning point of the story? One of the brothers thinks about and sees the situation and says, there is no way that we can let Benjamin stay here and be captured. Because Benjamin is our father's other favorite son. Our father's already lost one of his favorite sons in Joseph, who we sold away into slavery. And now if we let him lose his other favorite son, Benjamin, oh my goodness, he will die, right? The old man cannot bear losing another child. So take me. He offers to sacrifice himself on Benjamin's behalf and says, please let Benjamin go back to our father and put me in prison for the rest of my life instead, if that is what is going to happen, or even put to death for this crime that has apparently occurred. And Joseph is undone, right? His heart is melted by this offer of self-sacrificial love on the part of his brother Judah. And it's Judah who does it. And he says, guys, it's me. I'm sorry. No, look, it's all going to be fine. We're going to figure this out. You guys come move here to Egypt. We'll give you all the food you need. Bring father back. Let's just be a family again here together. And all this happens because of Judah's offer of self-sacrificial love. And of course, again, it's no coincidence that it's Judah who offers to do this. Because what this is pointing us toward, the picture this is painting for us, is this future, even more incredible offer that Jesus makes to sacrifice himself and his entire life for the sake of all of God's family, all of God's children. Right? Okay. So, we could also say here then that Judah is a type of Christ, right? Judah is a type of Christ because he has offered to make this sacrifice on behalf of his love for his brother and for the love he has for his father. Okay, one more quick thing here. So far we've been focusing mostly on individual people, but I also want us to never lose sight of a kind of a grander story arc that's going on here. So if we skip ahead to Genesis 50, and I'm in verses 19 and 20. Let me read this for you very quickly. It says, Joseph is kind of summarizing everything that's happened in this story, and he said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." Okay, this is really cool. Number one, Joseph could be preaching this to himself, right? Because maybe he meant something for evil too, but God turned it into good through Judah and his offer. But look at what he says here. He says, what people intend for evil, God can create good out of, and God can intend it to save lots and lots of people and to save everyone. And absolutely, this is showing us this picture to come where Jesus is going to be put on a cross. We always say, why do we call it Good Friday? This is like the worst thing that's ever happened to someone. He's put on this trial, and he's arrested and killed, and then he dies on the cross. What a terrible thing. But this terrible thing that happened, can God not create good out of it? And on the cross, has God not created the greatest good that has ever happened in the history of the universe to one of the greatest tragedies that's ever happened to this innocent man being killed for no reason? But God says through this, the mystery of the power of the cross, right, can be revealed, that I can make the greatest thing and the greatest good happen even from something that is so terrible. I can rescue and save through even death. And I think that this story absolutely points us to that truth. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for sticking with me, and I can't wait to jump into more cool stories as we head into Exodus next week, and it's going to be great, and we'll see you then. Bye for now.